Second.
Second by Ms. Slater. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Likewise. Thank you. And today is our annual audit meeting, and I turn the items over. Item A is the audit summary, and this is Mayor Davis. We'll turn it over to you for any comments and a summary of the audit.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Bear with me for a minute, and I'll read over some things, and I think when I'm through, most of the questions that you're supposed to get answers to will be in the summary, if that's okay. Some of it is mundane information, but it's even though it's a couple of pages, when you look at all the pages that's in the audit, it's a very condensed version of what I consider to be the highlights. Bradley County's financial statements have been audited by the state. You know, I've had a question recently about what is a CAFR report. A lot of people don't realize that this is basically where the state comes in and looks at last year's numbers, verifies those numbers, sometimes makes some adjustments, sometimes they move them around a little bit, but they're basically verifying what we've said for the past year as it ended on that particular year, this year being June the 30th of 24. You're looking to see that they're fairly presented in conformity with the GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, and you look for no instances of noncompliance that were material, which is all true in this particular audit. The goal of the independent audit is to provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements for the year ended June 30th are free of material misstatements, as I just said. Some of the highlights from this audit, the county's audit that was released back just before Christmas. As you all know, over time, increases or decreases in net positions serve as a useful indicator. It's why it's the first thing I go to is to find the net position and see how it's changed, because it's usually an indicator of whether the financial position of the county is improving or deteriorating. So you want it to increase. Not that it always will. Some years it can't. But we've been fortunate in Bradley County. I think almost every year it has improved or has increased. The net position as of June 30th, 24 was $80,567,000, which was an increase in net position of $17 million. Oversimplified, if you were a business in the private sector, that would be your profit for the year. You're saying, okay, I spent this much, I brought in this much, my net profit is this. We're not in the business to make money, but you still want your net position to be on the increasing side. Bradley County had total bonds and other loans outstanding of $59,722,000. And something I always look for, I know we budget to decrease the debt, but I always want to look and see what the audit says that we actually decreased it by. And according to this, we decreased our debt by $7,558,000. Of the outstanding debt that's left, the $59 million that I mentioned, $51 million is for schools, and of that $51 million, $38,300,000 is for county schools, $13,300,000 for city schools. As you know, when we borrow money, we borrow proportionally according to ADA for city and county schools. Bradley County in this audit did maintain the AA2 rating from Moody's and the AA from Standard & Poor's. Unassigned fund balance, another important one. There's lots of fund balances reported in the audit, but the most important one from my perspective is the fund balances for general fund. And this audit shows at 6/30/24 of $12,718,000. And I do hear from time to time that fund balance is too much. It's 27%. My goal is 25%. So the bottom line is we met the goal. And 25% is always my goal because that's what it takes to get through the first 5 months of the year before the property taxes start coming in. Bradley County has established a comprehensive internal control framework that's designed to both protect the government's assets from loss, theft, or misuse, and to compile sufficient, reliable information for the preparation of the financial statements in conformity with GAAP. And they always, as a matter of fact, in the exit interview, they have a list of opportunities for improvement, but usually one of those off of that list will make the audit. This year we did have the one audit finding that says general fund, general ledger, payroll liability accounts were not reconciled. should have said with payroll reports. Um, the finance department, and that is a repeat finding partially. The finance department has been reconciling the insurance reports to the payroll records, but was not sufficiently reconciling to the ledger. Those are terms way above my pay grade. But audit and accounting type people understand it more than most of us do. We haven't reconciled to the ledger, which they want us to do so that we can show zero balances at the end of the year, which is almost impossible. But by putting it to the ledger, it satisfies at least the auditors for it being to zero. You got to understand this is a fluid account that always has debits and credits going in. So it's going up and down on a monthly basis. Um, but anyway, they weren't reconciling to the ledger. Um, it was explained in very lengthy discussions with the auditors that that's impossible to get there, and they're confident we can get there. So they're coming back in March or April to work with our staff to see if they can't get it much, much closer and get it reconciled to the ledger, which is what they're wanting to do there. It's definitely a room for an improvement. And I think with their help in the spring, we'll be able to get there before June 30th of 25, hopefully. But just so you can put these in perspective, and I give these numbers every year, but think about them, giving you an idea of the volume of activity that we have. We have 3 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff, and they deal with approximately 23,600 ledger transactions, 13,400 invoices are keyed, 6,800 warrants are written, and 16,639 payroll checks and direct deposits with a 3.5 staff. But to recap, there was 1 audit finding and no instances of non-compliance that were material to the financial statements. Our long-term debt decreased by $7.5 million, and we maintained a fund balance in general fund of 27%. All in all, good, clean audit. That's a summary. Now, you go on down the thing, and if you have other questions that I may not have covered, I'll try my best to answer.
Is there any questions referencing the summary to start with, and before we move on to item B on the agenda? There's no hands. Mayor, go ahead.
When you get to B, it is the finding, and that's something I've already addressed. I think it will be taken care of this spring to their satisfaction. Hopefully it will, because they're actually offering the help to get us there. Caleb and the other staff member is committed to working with them. Hopefully they'll be able to put the time it takes to get us to where they want us to be, or at least they will see that we may not can get there, but I think we'll be able to with their help. And again, sending it to the thing that we weren't doing, like I said, was reconciling them to the ledger. By adding that step, I think we'll be able to get it to where they'll be satisfied when they come back in the spring before the end of the year. That was the only one we had. Now, we always have several points to discuss at the exit interview, and I can almost bet one of those things that are discussed in that exit interview will be a finding next year. Again, I wish they wouldn't call them findings, but there'll be rooms for improvement. They've said, hey, you need to look at this, look at this, look at this, and they'll have about 10 or 15 things. And there'll be one of them that we may not have looked at to the extent they want us to, and it'll end up being a finding. But that's fine. Again, if you could just think of them as opportunities for improvement, we're always looking to improve, and I think that's actually what they're all about too. They just have an old term called findings. But that's pretty much on ours. The Register of Deeds, I think, has been taken care of. That was a thing that had to do with the software and the logs. And there is another audit too that I didn't bring the results from, but they also do an IT audit every year. We had no findings there, and that's another one because every year, with things changing in software and so forth, sometimes we're surprised at some of the things they ask. But in recent years, it has to do with changing passwords. You know, some of you hear employees complain a lot of times about having to change the passwords every so often. That's the thing we put in place because we kept getting threatened that we were going to have a finding on that. And a lot of those have to do with IT things that I don't totally understand. But we had no findings this year on that particular audit either. It doesn't make it in this book. It's a separate audit, but it is one that goes on for several months out of the year also. If I said enough there, if you have more direct question, I'll try. You, if
Anybody have any other questions referencing what he just went over? Mr. Blake, we'll turn it over to you.
Real quick, Mayor, on the finding, it's the general fund ledger payroll liability. We have multiple funds. Is this the only one that?
yeah, I
Because
think
there's payroll, you guys have a payroll, your fund, roads has their own fund, that all have to reconcile to the ledger.
I know schools are. Having talked with schools a lot over this subject lately, that seems to be the one step they do that we hadn't been doing uh, all these years. But it's felt like that by adding that step that they're doing, because I just point blank asked schools, I said, why in the hell do you not have this finding? And the only difference we could come up with was that. That's why I use that as a crutch. It seems to be what's missing, and it seems to be something that'll help us get closer to that zero.
Rounds, anyone got any other question? Mary, you had something?
If no other questions, you're going down your agenda, I've already addressed, but if you have other questions, statement of net position, again, that's an important part of the audit. And keep in mind, our audit, and you see newspaper stories a lot, so-and-so had a good audit, so-and-so had a good audit. You put all those departments together, and that's this audit. So this is truly it's schools, it's everybody, and it's consolidated. That's why it's called the annual consolidated financial report. Um, it's all consolidated into one, but again, finance has their own road department has their own finance, and so do schools. So those three divisions, but they all come together. When they first started making us do it this way 20 years ago, I guess, it scared me to death, because I thought, how are we going to get schools and roads and everybody to come together with one consolidated budget and be in this consolidated report? That was a requirement according to statement so-and-so. I don't remember the number of it. They come out every year or two with a new statement that you got to have a new rule you go by. But it's worked well. But that makes it hard to explain too, because these various departments will have, they'll come in and they'll tell so-and-so, hey, no issues with your department, but they don't handle payroll. They don't do a lot of these other things that that become part of this consolidated report. But the net position is an important thing. And then it talks about management's discussion. That's where we proactively explain everything in the front of your audit. It's actually management that has done that. So and it should be verified somewhere in that audit. If you were wanting to have information, you go to management's discussion, and it's more in lay terms of what we would say on the street. Does that make sense? But it's all verified somewhere in those numbers. The confusing thing about an audit is they will look at the same thing from 4 different points of view, and they'll report it different ways because it's coming from a different. And again, I'm not saying this like these guys would say it, but I'm saying it in layman's terms. That's why I get confused. So I go through and I'll make I'll write down page numbers of things that are important, because I'm constantly having to go find what was the ending fund balance for this fund, what was the ending fund, and those numbers are all in there, but you'll find them on 10 different pages, if that makes sense. And sometimes it seems like they conflict, but it's because of the different ways they're looking at it, the auditors, when they're doing their thing. So that's probably more than you care to know about, but it's what makes an audit so complicated for us lay people to understand a lot of times, and I'm definitely one of those lay people. Having said that, I think that's most everything, other than trying to answer your questions that you have in general.
Mr. Blake?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that net position, it caught my attention as well, in the sense that it's probably, if you go back to the last 5 audits, it's the largest variance, or the largest increase between one year and the next. So that catching my interest, I sent an email to the auditor, the manager, Steve Ritter. He replied back with the following: the number that you are looking at for the net position has been trending upward for the last few years. That's a good thing, as the mayor said. It means we're basically not spending more than we're bringing in. And the main factors probably being the influx of art funds, increased interest rates. As you know, the interest rates over the last couple of years have been a little bit higher, but they're adjusting. I think the Fed the other day said they're going to flatten out. So that was a variable in there. And paying down our outstanding debt. We paid down a little over $7 million, and that's principal that we're paying on. We obviously pay a lot more in our budget, but that's principal and interest. But if you want to get into the like where it's at, because that net position is multiple funds. That's the whole county is one big picture. On page here 36 in the audit, when you have a chance, and Lori, if you want, can bring that out. It gives you more of a detail at the fund level where things are, and I reviewed that. The main thing, reason why I bring this up, and I totally agree with the mayor, this is a good thing. Just this is the largest one we've had. But I guess to my fellow commissioners, as we go forward, and we've talked about this in finance and in the full commission, we're pretty much done with the appropriations of art money. And we've, I think, done a pretty good job of spending the 22 million. We bought a lot of equipment and stuff like that, but it's waning away. So we're going to have to go back to, I guess, pre-COVID days or pre-art money days on how we go about funding the things that are requested of us. I just think that's very interesting that we had this net position. The reasons why, and one of the number one reasons why, is that art money. We were using it instead of using property tax, basically, to get some of the things that we needed to do on that. I told the mayor, he and I had a meeting, I think last year or whatever. Whenever you get a new set of money or a windfall, whatever, I think of it, you use that money to buy the things that are not fun, but you got to buy them. So that's kind of what we did. A lot of equipment, fire trucks, ambulances, reflectors on our roads, striping on the roads and stuff like that. So I just want to say kind of what that is. We will continue to try to reduce the debt. The other part with respects to the debt is if you look at the total debt, and as he said, most of it is education, which is the responsibility of it. This is the lowest point that we have had, the lowest amount of debt we've had in the last 20 years. I think it was in the mid-50s, Mayor, something like that. We haven't been that low. Now, obviously, we've got stuff coming in the next 24 months, 36 months. It's going to go up a little bit, but when I first came on in 14, it was in the high 80s, and then it's been trending down and stuff like that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on the net position and everything that the mayor just said.
If I could add one thing on the net position before you go on, Commissioner, a lot of it has to do with assets too. If you'll notice, not every every department that becomes part of this audit has an increase in net position. The overall net position is 17 million, and that tells you that they're spending most of their money on salaries and so forth, and they're not investing in their buildings, for example. ARP helped us a lot there. All of ours is just about all going for assets. So, and schools usually are too now. If it could be the other way around, and that one has not had the money to increase their assets or update their assets, so the asset has been dropping down, which causes their net position to not be as positive as it should be. So the fact that we've done a lot of asset improvements, we don't get a lot of credit for that, but nearly all of ARP has been for assets. So if you can book it as an asset, that helps you with your net position.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anything? Mr. Winters?
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say that I think this is the 5th or 6th year that I've been on this audit committee, and while you never really like findings, there are some that are in the benign state and not. And I think this is the cleanest audit that I've seen with respect to findings. And so I just wanted to point that out to say congratulations not only to the mayor but to your staff, because I think that's having been on other sides of audits that don't go as well. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Winters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. This is a great audit. The only thing that jumps out at me is the term lack of management oversight.
I know it.
And that's just a buzzword. It's kind of negative. But you have a plan with your personnel to work on this, or do you need any new personnel? You got 3
No.
full-time and part-time?
No, we'll be okay there. I'm not gonna come in here whining like
Yeah.
some would do.
No.
We'll get it done with their help, but, that's not an easy one to get fixed. It's not like balancing your checkbook. That's oversimplifying it a million times, because of the fact that it's always, we may have a credit and then well, for example, I'll just get into it just a little bit. We get a monthly bill on health insurance. We're supposed to pay as bill. We pay that bill, and then we have 13, you might say, corrections. 10 people are no longer employees, 14 have been added. So there's lots of debits and credits every single month. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And that's why it's a little more complicated than balancing your checkbook. But again, an accountant can take that and put it on that payroll ledger and keep up with it. It's always going to be there, but then they can explain it and the auditors are happy. That makes sense. And so it's very complicated. We were addressing it from last year's like we said we would, but not to the extent that made them, that we should have been.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, I agree with Alan Smith. Mayor, this is an exceptionally good audit, and auditors can't not say something.
Right.
So they have to say something, and so I think they've thought about what's the most benign thing we can say, and that's what they did. I'd also point out that I looked at the net position, and I think you're to be commended for that as well. A nice, strong improvement, even from last year. So not only congratulations, but I think you guys are working hard. It's hard to imagine you're doing this with 3 full-time and 2 part-time. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Mayor, you got any other?
I was just looking to see if we've answered all the questions. I think these questions are based on what the state expects you to go through, and I think we have, but if you don't think we have, we'll do more. We had no problem with auditors. You know, the auditors, he mentioned that they've got to say something. We'll have very good discussions sometimes. The very first year I was here, I've told this before, they gave me a finding on segregation of duties. I came into office, I didn't fire anybody, I didn't do any changing. In my first year, I had a finding on segregation of duties. I said, come on, guys, I didn't change anything. She didn't have an audit finding the year before. That year, that was their big thing, segregation of duties. And of course, most of us would have that finding if they wanted to hone in on it, because nobody has this sufficient number of people to do what they want us to do usually. You know what I'm saying? But we were able to change the way we did things in the office. My secretary, for example, is not even in finance department, but she has a role to play so that there's not the same person doing this. You can't write a check and sign a check, you know, that kind of thing. But I didn't change anything that first year, and I got a finding, and my predecessor didn't have one the year before. But the point they made was good. No, but you need to address this, which we did. So we addressed it, and we went right on, and you've seen it in other departments over the years. I truly think, even though I'm always at odds with state auditors, their goal is to give us reasons to improve, opportunities for improvement. I just wish they would change that title in their book. But I think that's their goal, and that's how we look at it. There's going to be something else next year, but we'll look at it and make it better, hopefully.
Moving on, I did like the way Mayor, just one comment real quick. I feel like we have used the ARC money to really help us. We won't have a lot of that this coming year, so we'll probably start looking at going back to the old ways of financing and taking care of things that we need to do. I was going to ask you, Miss Lori, do we need to vote on A and B at the end, or that's everybody, no one has any concerns or questions referencing that, or any disagreements on that? We'll go on from there. Seeing no hands raised. other need to bring before the turn my mic off. Any other business? Any other concerns that we need to address or talk about? If not, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Oh, wait a minute. Anybody got any communication from the office?